Alright guys, this is Scott Augustine for cardrunners.com doing the first part of my new series, which is going to be probably one of the first Ante series on the internet. It's going to be a 1020 deep with Antes series for 6 max. At the start here in the bottom left we have a 1020 shallow table. In the top right, the finishing up of a 25-50 heads up game. In the top right against Dura, I don't know too much about the player. I haven't played many hands against him, so I can't really comment either way on how he or she is. In the bottom left, we have a 1020 table that we're going to play for probably maybe 10 minutes of the footage at the start, and then it will end up breaking. We'll just bring in two different deep tables. So just bear with me as we go through that, and let's start the footage. And we just pick up with kings here in the bottom left. It's a fairly standard 3-bet there. And in the top left, we're opening queen jack offsuit, four-handed with the antes. I think that's an absolute must. And Ueli just open shoves queens there, which is something to note. Not many people would play queens like that, though. Something to keep in mind is the fact that there was another player, Roy J, cold called it, and so my 3-bet was a little bigger, so maybe Ueli thought he couldn't 4-bet get away for that size. So it might as well just shove and try to make himself look as weak as possible. And I get check raised in the top left by Sleepy Hippo. He is a player I don't have a ton of history with. He's definitely comfortable with the stakes. I've seen him play at 10, 20, 25, 50. He doesn't play me heads up, and so I assume if he's going to be messing around on this flop, he's not going to be following through on a triple barrel, especially on this turn. So I think it's pretty safe for me to check it down here. I think betting might be a little thin, though I think I have the best hand a ton of the time when he does call when I bet. I think it's the only hands he'll be beating when he does that. When I do that on the turn, or like a backdoor spade draw that he picked up, which I think he might even bet himself anyway. So I think there's not a ton of value from that bet, and I could easily just be value cutting myself against Jack 9 or something. I get 3-bet in the bottom right against an unknown who has less than 100 big blinds with 7-9 offsuit. I think that's an easy fold. I defend Jack 9 offsuit in the top left. I'm going to be very, very loose in defending my big blind to any small blind open, especially this deep, and especially with the antes. I could raise this flop. I could also 3-bet the hand pre-flop. I chose to just flat and kind of play it a little more passively. The idea is I'm trying to get to showdown a lot in a lot of these blind versus blind situations against Sleepy Hippo, and that's a really, really good way of developing reads on players very quickly. You don't really develop reads on players. Like, I don't have a really good read on Ueli yet, just because we got in queens versus kings down here. I do have a good read on Sleepy Hippo now after these two hands of, okay, he check raised and then shut down with air on a Jack 9 3 draw flop with backdoor clubs and backdoor straight draws and one overcard, and then he just shut down out of position from the blinds. He was also defending with ace-4 suited, four-handed with antes from the big blind to my open from under the gun, which I mean effectively is the cutoff. And so we're just gaining a lot more info from these marginal spots, and I would definitely recommend doing this. If you don't know a player too well, try to throw yourself into obviously not hugely negative EV spots, but definitely try to throw yourself into spots where you're just put in scenarios where both of you will be a little out of your comfort zone, and when that happens, you'll both learn a lot about each other. There'll be a large exchange of information compared to a more standard spot, and as long as you're better than the player, or at least think you're better than the player, you will be using the given information better than he will. So in theory, the more information that is obtained between both you, the more the better player's edge will grow. And so you really want to get into these marginal spots of, yeah, sometimes you can find folds in some of these places, but also if it's not going to cost you a lot in the long run, if it's pretty close, kind of embrace the variance a little bit there, where you might want to take a low variance route and then just go for the route where you get to show down a little bit more and you get to see what exactly they're thinking. And so I get fairly fortunate here in the top left after taking 2 off to hit top 2 pair. I'm not sure if the river was like a queen or a king or something. I think that might be a pretty bad call, because I think there's a decent amount of the time I'm getting beat by like, there's just not a ton of hands he can be value betting that are worse than Jack 9 here if the river's like a queen or a king. And I don't think he's straight bluffing on this board often enough to call a river bet, so I'd probably have to either raise and turn my hand into a bluff or just fold. I pretty much have to raise here on the river. I think my hand's just almost always best. The detracting factor from wanting to do that is the fact that there's just not a ton of hands on this board that he can call with, especially if he's value betting thin, which I assume he is. He's a decent enough player for my estimation. So if he's got like ace 9, pocket 10s, I just don't see getting looked up here a ton. He might look me up with like an ace jack rivered hand, something like that, but even then, a lot of my raising range is just something that's kind of slow played, something I backed into. A pretty strong range here, because a lot of the time I'll have a hand that can see showdown here, so he doesn't expect me to turn that hand into a bluff very often. There is some percentage of the time I will be doing that, but I don't think he should expect it very often enough to make a call profitable with a marginal hand here. There are hands though like 9-8, Jack-8, 6-8 that he can definitely look me up with here. And we see that he does end up folding here, which I think he can have a pretty strong hand there and still find a fold pretty easily, so we don't have that ton of history there, but we are developing it. And so whenever you see players that will be like, they'll post a hand, they'll be like, not a ton of history, he's 55, 54, 55, 30 over 200 hands. Well, how don't you have a lot of history, you know? You should be putting yourself in spots that develop this history so that you can make better reads later on in bigger pots. So that's definitely something you have to be looking for. In the top right, I open up pocket 9s, check back a flop of 2 overs, and then get shoved on by Sadejo. He'll become a really weird kind of player, and so we should start kind of looking at him. We don't have to worry too much about trying to take his money. We're just going to wait for a hand and just, because I mean he's betting 220 here. What could he possibly be doing that with? I guess it's some sort of weird flush draw, like some marginal flush draw that he wants to give himself odds to call or something. I don't know. It's pretty hard to get into the head of someone who's betting like that in 2 of those hands. In the bottom left, you'll see that I'm opening up 6-7 offsuit in the small blind, and it's definitely not a standard open for me. If I had some 10-20 regular into my left, there's no way I'd be opening there unless I felt he was playing too many tables and just giving up too many big blinds. And I flop on to pair, c-bet, and Luxa just folds immediately. I think that kind of shows why I can open 6-7 offsuit there, because he's been folding too much, and then also he's been just giving up too much in pots where he just doesn't hit. He's playing a little fit or fold. And he min raises me basically here. I'm getting 80 into 220, plus he's got 1100 behind, so I'm getting good odds on the call, both immediate and implied, to try to hit my 2. He's definitely got a pretty strong hand here. I'd say queens are better, maybe ace king would be a range for him. I hit my 2, and he full pots it when the flush draw comes. And that's a little worrisome because it's kind of indicative of him having a strong hand and a whiff check raise on the flop, and then he's sees that the draw is coming, he's a little scared, and then he just shoves it on the river. And I think jacks may also be in his range. I didn't expect him to shove queens or kings there, but it's still a call there on the river just because of the absolute strength of my hand. I can only put him on really aces playing that way that beat me. Maybe jacks do if he's going to play it like queens like that, but I mean, if someone rivers a set for 60 big blinds against you and they've just got less than pot size bet left, then you lose if you have a lower set. There's not much you can do. So I call off there, and he does show up with the pocket queens, which I think is a really weird play for him to play. Really weird way for him to play that. I don't envision myself calling with any hand less than queens there on the river. In the bottom right, I have a little bit of a recent history with this Urban DB guy. He plays 10-20 and 25-50 somewhat erratically. I play also erratically, so he could be playing pretty regularly, and maybe I'm the one playing erratically. But I see him from time to time, and he's definitely not scared of doing some things in these games. And I got my stack in the bottom right by doubling up through him by getting pocket tens. I've been 3-betting him a lot, and he 4-bet me after I 3-bet him from the small blind to the cutoff raise, and I decided to take one off. It was kind of a small 4-bet, and I had tens, and I didn't really exactly know what his 4-betting range there was. It's a little loose of a peel, though. Peeling pocket tens there, 200 big blinds out of position against a decent player, is going to put you in a lot of really tricky spots. So if you're not prepared for like any of the variants that will come with that, that's not a spot where you need to be playing for like showdown and all these things to be looking at for building up history. That's a spot where you can lose a lot of money not even knowing if you're ahead or behind, and I'd suggest probably either not 3-betting it or folding if they're going to 4-bet and they're kind of a tighter player there. But I decided to take one off that time. The flop came down 10-9-8, all of hearts, so I flopped top set on a very, very, very dangerous board. I led into him for about 3/4 of the pot maybe. He shoved over with 2 black aces, and I held up. I don't know how I feel about his shove there. I think I actually don't really like his shove there, I think, against my leading range. But he doesn't have a ton of history with me, so he's not really sure what I'm doing that with. It's definitely a board where I could take away a lot of his hands there, so maybe he does have to shove there. I'm not entirely sure. And I c-bet this flop, trying to fold out like his ace highs, maybe his set up a double barrel to take him off pocket sevens or whatever. And then an offsuit king comes, and I'm going to be betting this as a bluff very often in a 3-bet pot, because it's just a good card I can start to represent for triple barrels of like ace king, king queen, whatever. And then when I do have king jack, whatever, I have to bet it so that I can credibly rep it when I don't have it. Because if I'm checking behind king jack here, he's not really going to give me credit next time when a king comes and he's got his hand that he's got. I don't pull it up here, but he ended up having pocket fours, which I think is, from a standpoint of a logical sense, it's a likely hand for him to show up with. It's just an unimproved pocket pair, because he's like, okay, pre-flop, he's been messing around with me, I'll call for both set value and because I think I have the best hand enough. And then on the flop of 10-5-3, 2 hearts, he can have draws, he can have just air, like I had 2 overs. And then on a turn, he's going to rep the king a lot, so I'll call again. And then the river comes. The problem with this is, though, like, it's going to set you up to have to make some really big hero calls. Like, if I didn't hit that king, let's say I had queen 9 or whatever, and I was just double barreling with a gut shot, on that river completed like every draw known to man. It's going to be a really, really tough call, especially if I can bet an ace there for value, which I'm definitely capable of, and I assume he'd think I was. How is he going to look me up there at pocket fours? I mean, what does he really beat? So, and pocket fours are pretty close to a lot of other hands that you might think are better calls, like maybe jack 10. It's kind of the same hand in that scenario, because I'm not really betting, like, I might bet queen 10 on the turn for value there, but not many other hands in between, like jack 10 and 4s for value, and so it becomes pretty hard, and you see the power of position there with deep stacks. I mean, he was just going to be in no man's land on the river if I decided to bet. I get limped into by Sadejo. If he would have limped, like shoved or whatever, I was definitely snapping with pocket 7s, and then he just decided to check give up on the jack 6-3 2-diamond board. 3-bet Sleepy Hippo here with ace queen. Ace queen's a pretty tricky hand to play, especially offsuit out of position against a kind of aggressive player, because if he 4-bets you, you're in a pretty tough situation. You're probably calling because he can be messing around and he's going to be wanting to rep a lot of ace high flops, but you're also kind of depending on hitting or making a move on a lot of flops, and with ace queen offsuit, there's just not going to be enough draws or anything that you can credibly, or that can give you enough equity to facilitate some of the moves that you would like to make against this type of player. Now that I 3-bet him with 9-7 offsuit here, I'd like to have 9-7 suited here, obviously, but 9-7 offsuit is a loose peel, and I probably fold it 90% of the time. But at this point, it just felt like he was trying to take some pots away from me. It felt like he was trying to play back at me. And you would think, well, why wouldn't you just want to then 4-bet him, or 5-bet him actually, this would become. And the answer is, I thought with this type of player, there's a decent possibility of him 6-bet bluffing, and or at least putting in very, very lightly. And I did not want to just kind of throw that out there and be forced to fold. If I had like maybe 9s or 10s, some sort of like marginal pair, like in my mind 9s and 10s are marginal once you get to in a big blind steep, then I would probably 5-bet to induce. And if we just take a breather in the hand here, we've got 2 hands going on, actually 3. In the bottom left, I'm just going to c-bet and take it down against luck, so I think it's the only play against this type of player. And in the top left, I floated the flop because I think he's going to be c-betting this flop all the time, and people are very happy to try to 4-bet to take it away from you, and then they'll c-bet a king high flop very often. But if he doesn't have it here, it's going to be really hard for him to double barrel here because it basically puts him all in. And if he has like any sort of equity, he's going to have to call it off. If he's got like 8-9 or whatever, he's going to have to call off when I shove in here. And all of my hands that I'm going to be shoving in here are going to be dominating a lot of his kind of semi-bluff double barrel hands here. And I'm not going to be I'm going to be floating here, but I'm also going to have the strongest part of my range still in my range here as well. Because if I had a set 2-pair, king, queen, whatever on this board, I don't envision myself raising it all. And so that leads me to believe that my best way for taking this board away is to float to the flop and then take it away on the turn or river, depending on what they come and depending on his actions. And it's not a plan that I'm going to use all the time. Like, this is kind of an outlier of a hand where I'm defending with 3-betting with 9-7 offsuit. Normally I'd fold it. Then I'm defending to a 4-bet because I feel like he's making some moves against me, which in retrospect, if I feel like he's going to be starting to make some moves on me, I should probably just wait for hands that play a little better post-flop. So not necessarily, I don't have to wait for aces or kings or whatever, because while those hands are good, they're also a little hard to play post-flop, not in position but out of position. But with the hands like queen jack suited, king queen suited, ace queen, those hands all play a ton better post-flop than 9-7 offsuit. And so I might want to wait for a couple of high cards, maybe some suits in there, and go from there if I'm going to want to start inducing 4-bets. But I decided to do it here. Once I got to here, can't go back. It'll be fine. Just try to make the best of it once you do this. And then I hit my gut shot, which is obviously not the plan, but it's always very nice. And since my plan was to take it away on the turn most likely, I think a turn bet is less than prudent here, because then it'll mean that if my turn bet was with the idea of taking down an overwhelming amount, I don't want to make that obviously when I turn the nuts. When I bet a few times that I do make my hand, I need to change my plan on the fly in order to get paid off on that specific instance. Because he's never going to see 9-7 offsuit coming here. And so I decided to check through there to try to feign weakness, represent like a 10 hand, maybe 10-9, whatever, that just wants to see here, and then hope that he either catches up or decides that I wouldn't check through a strong hand on this turn and decides to shove in as a bluff or whatever. He ends up shoving in, and we'll see what he shows up with there. In the top right, we have a player who we don't know very well at all. I've never seen him before, so I'm assuming he's a weaker player. He's not on any other tables. He's only in for 100 big blinds at a deep table with antes. And so I see bet here on the board with my pair, and I think it might be, that's also an okay spot to check behind too, because I don't envision him check calling with a ton here that I beat, and I kind of want to charge draws, but I mean, this type of player, he's not going to be putting in a lot of moves and stuff on me. So what does this check min raise mean? This check min raise, an overwhelmingly amount of the time, means that he has top pair. I don't know why this is. I don't know who taught every player that you don't really recognize at 10-20 that check raising or like min raising when they're in position, a top pair hand is like the way to go, but they just do it. I'm not sure if it's because they think okay, I want to charge draws and I want to kind of see where I'm at, so I'll min raise. And if he calls, I kind of know I have the best hand, and then we can play from there, which I guess is fine. But if you're gonna do that, why not make it like 320 and actually give yourself a chance to take down the hand if you don't have the hand? But they're not really thinking in balance issues and such. And so whenever someone check min raises here, you can immediately peg them as probably having top pair way more often than you think they should in this spot, and then also being kind of a weaker player here. And so if we know he has top pair, it opens up a few doors to us. I can call here for the min raise, getting a little over 4-1, and I can either try to spike my 10 or my 8, which, I mean, is alright. A lot of the time when they check min raise here, they're going to be either weak leading the turn, like for a quarter pot or something, or just checking through altogether. And so it's really like I'm getting 2 cards here most of the time against this type of player. And also, it leads me to be able to play, if I had a draw here, like diamonds or queen jack, I would not be 3-betting here. And we see in the top left that Sleepy got pretty unlucky to hit his running 8s here. And I think that's the very top of his range in the top left, because I think with any sets or 2-pair on the turn, he would probably shove in because the board is getting pretty scary. The backdoor diamonds are there. The 9 and 7 automatically make a straight, such like that. And because not only would he be scared of getting sucked out on, he wouldn't want to kill his action against like king, queen, or whatever. So I think that's pretty much the top of his range with ace-8 there, and I still beat it, so I think my check through on the turn was definitely prudent. Back to the hand in the top right. If we're looking here, I could bet here, but it doesn't really accomplish much. I think it'll be fine for me to just check it through, and if we get to showdown, it's not a terrible scenario either, because I then can solidify my read of, okay, yeah, he did have king jack or whatever. Now, it's very important when they take this line that when someone check min raises here, and for the most part, they're going to have top pair. A very small percentage of the time, let's say 5 or 10%, they're going to have a draw, whether it be queen jack or diamonds here. And both of those got here, so we lose to that. But then you're saying, okay, well, if it's a small percentage of the time, shouldn't I be raising here to rub that draw? And in a perfect world, yes, you'd be raising here, both draws hit, there's no way you can call without one of the draws. But the problem is, these type of players, like 300 secret a little big, most of the time they'll weak lead to like 220 here, or like 180. And then both draws will hit. He'll have like ace-10, ace-king, maybe even like king-jack, king-queen, and you'll raise to like 700, 600, something that from a logical standpoint makes a ton of sense for you to have a draw here, and then they'll still call you. And then you're sitting there, the pot goes to them, and you're like, you show you're flipped over 10 into a bluff, and he shows his king-queen triumphantly, and he's just like, this is terrific, no one on the internet's going to bluff me. And you have to try to just realize that there's sometimes, and a lot of players, there's points in the hands where you just have to wait for hands. You cannot take away hands against weaker players. You can't bluff a player who's not willing to fold. It's just not going to happen. And what they'll do is they'll make that weak lead to try to get a cheap showdown, and then once you raise, they'll talk themselves into a call to be like, oh, well, he's trying to bluff me. I only bet small. Now it probably looks weak. I'll call here. And so this leads to 2 important factors. When you don't have it and the draw hits, you have to just give up. When you do have the draw and it does hit, you have to raise huge. You have to make like 300 into 1200, 1300 here. You have to raise, if he weak leads for like 180, you have to make it like 800, something just ridiculous, and they are not folding. I don't know what they're going to put you on, and frankly, it doesn't really matter. They are not going to be folding here. If you hit huge on the river here, you just raise huge, especially if they weak lead there. And so that's definitely a way to combat someone who takes that line. It's a really common line randomly. It doesn't seem like it should be a common line, but it seems like players from all different walks of life and schools of thought use that line if they're a weaker player. I defend in the bottom left against Hop Tizzle to his small open. I could 3-bet there, and I could also fold. Hauptizel is, I think, a player who's normally playing like probably 5-10 as his main game, and then 10-20 is his game. He's in here because there's a couple of weaker spots, and if you notice, he's not at any of the other deep tables, so it looks like he's just kind of opening this up, sees a weaker table, and decided to go for it here. And when that's the case, it's kind of like not a reputation precedes you thing, but like my screen name's recognizable. I play these games pretty often, and so someone who's moving up to 10-20, and not like moving up, but like playing it just only when there's good good games going, they're going to be very less likely to be barreling me or making moves on me rather than, let's say, Sleepy Hippo would be, or Eulalie, or I Hustle even, who plays these regularly. And so I think I can get him to play pretty straightforward here. And when he doesn't c-bet on this flop, I think he has a little bit of something like maybe Jack 10, King 10, something he's playing for pot control. And that leads me to believe that I can't take it away on this turn very often. What I could do is try to bet and then double barrel him off a lot of hands, but it's putting in a lot of money on just kind of a hope there. So I decided to just check it out and see what he's doing. And in the top right, I have show opening here. I have he limped the button, which is also a weak play from what we'll see. And then he bets 40 into this, and it looks like he's just kind of taking a stab. I check raise here, as you see Hop shows 8s there once I pull it up. I check raise in the top right on that Jack 5-4 all diamond boards with 6-7 offsuit with a diamond. And I think it does two things there that are good. I have a lot of equity, so it protects my equity and kind of like just puts more money in when I have a decent amount of equity, but also 7 high in terms of showdown value. And also it allows me to kind of isolate show with taking kind of Eulalie, who's the only player at the table who can really hurt me, out of the hand. If he can hurt me, then I don't want him to be able to like get any crazy ideas about squeezing me there if I flat against show, because if it was heads up, I'd probably still raise against show, but there's also sometimes where I just flat if I thought show was only betting when he had something there. But I think with Eulalie behind me, it's an automatic raise there. In the bottom left, we have a pretty interesting hand. If you look, I'll fast forward a little to see stack sizes. Okay, so at the start of the hand, we had about 100 big blinds in the bottom left. Luxa has been stuck a little bit. He's not a regular in the game, so he's probably not used to losing 3,000 or whatever. And we stacked him earlier with the 2s hand, where he 3-bet pre-flop, but it was way too small of a 3-bet for his stack size. And so we saw that we took one off there, it checked through, hit our set, and then he's probably a little steaming off the fact that we called him with 2s, and then he let us get there by not betting that flop and then betting the turn and shoving the river. And so he's probably a little mad at himself about not protecting his hand. What's this mean? It means that if he's probably going to be overprotecting his hand, overplayed hands here, compared to how he was playing earlier. And what that would mean is I don't think he would ever not 3-bet a pair better than 8s here pre-flop. He might, maybe 9s, but I think even then it would be somewhat marginal either way. 10s and better, I think he's almost always 3-betting pre-flop here. And so that leads me to believe that he's not really messing around on this 6-4-4 flop, but I think it only goes up to a point of where he's going to be trying to protect it. If he had like a lock hand, like a 4 or like pocket 6s here, I don't think he's playing it like this strongly. I think this raise reeks of like him having a hand that he thinks is best now, but is probably is the majority of the time much worse than pocket 8s, and my 8s are just crushing him here. And so we've decided we're not folding to this raise, so then what's our best move? Are we going to call, or are we going to shove? And I don't think we can raise any smaller than a shove here with his raise size. We can kind of rep like 5-7, 5-3, and so I think if we're going to raise, I think a shove is best. And the deciding factor that made me shove here is because my 8s, while overwhelmingly the best hand, and also his hand that I'm trying to extract value with, you could see I decided to call it first and then I rethink it. his hands that I'm putting him on are like sevens, fives, ace six, six seven. He could have 5-7 himself, but I think he might call that to try to hit twos, threes, all these hands that are just worse than eights. But also, there's going to be a lot of scare cards that can come on the turn that if he's willing to get it in now, he might shut down on the turn. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want the chance to stack one of the weaker players at the table, because it's much easier to take their money than it is, let's say, Hop Tizzle. And so it's a race kind of between all the players that are a little bit stronger to take one of the weaker players' money, because you'll see once he loses his money and leaves the table, the game kind of breaks around it. And so once the game breaks, you have no more opportunity to make money. You need to be maximizing your EV against these weaker players. And you'll see that he calls off with twos, and a king came on the turn. I think if I flatted there and then the turn king came, I think he would be shutting down a lot more often than he's stacking off there on the flop there with his twos. And I'm pretty happy with that result. I think I played that pretty well with the recent history that was going on. And that's the type of recent history that I'm talking about, that you're kind of creating. It's things that are just like, okay, if I was posting that hand, I'd be like, okay, flop came down 6-4-4, blind versus blind, against a weaker player who a round before had gotten stacked against me by 3-betting too small. With twos, I defended. We checked through an ace-high flop, then I had turned my set, and he bet, and then shoved his queens into there. And that would be some sort of recent history to talk about. It's not like, well, we have no history. Here are his pre-flop stats. Here's his aggression factor. What do you guys think? And that's just, you can't base reads off numbers. There's so many different players, especially at this level. They're just so much more sophisticated than their numbers suggest, that just like playing situations off the numbers means you're just kind of not being lazy, but like just short-sighted in your view of their game. And the bottom left, the game's going to be breaking in a little bit. I think maybe one or two more hands, and I'll bring up another table, which is interesting. We'll see Eulaley's. We can kind of form a read on Eulalie of either he's playing too many tables or he just doesn't want to play me heads up. Considering we don't have a ton of history, I would think that it would probably be that he doesn't want to play a heads up table with how many tables he's playing, and that's a bit of information we can use. So now in marginal spots, we're going to be, and he's putting in money, we're going to be more shifted towards a fold than a call or a raise, because we think that he's going to be playing a little more straightforward since he is playing a lot of tables that he doesn't want to play heads up. And in this top right table, I floated Escobar, c-bet this flop. I think he's c-betting this flop a ton. I don't want to raise though, because I can't really rep a ton when I raise here. If I had like a decent queen, I'd raise here to try to induce against him. But then with Show calling behind and me picking up my draw, if I didn't pick up my draw, I'd probably take a stab at the turn, because I think Show is calling behind with some hands that probably aren't going to be comfortable calling on the turn, and if they are comfortable calling the turn, they might not call the river if I shove, and I probably would stab there without picking up the draw. With the draw though, I don't want to get pushed off by hand by either of the players, three-handed, and so I decided to just check through and then try to hit my over or my nut flush. Didn't happen. Show bet out a huge amount there. It looks like he had a whiff check raise or like a slow played hand that just wanted to look like it was now bluffing. Since no draws missed off the flop or whatever, even a gut shot got there, there's no real reason for us to look him up light, so I don't really like his bet size there. And I brought up another table and then rearranged the tables. There was some sort of glitch where it started to flip-flop the tables, so try to follow where they went. The top left table stayed the same, but the top right table is now in the bottom right. The bottom right table is now in the top right. No, the bottom right table is now in the bottom left, and then in the top right is my new table. And it's got some of the same characters. A new person has come onto the scene who is Punaz, and I don't know much about him. All I know about him is that he's sat on all 4 tables that we see here. He spot in for 100 big blinds, and that's it. He doesn't play regularly on these at these stakes or on these tables, so I don't know a ton about him. I'd assume that he's either just kind of taking a shot, or he doesn't have a ton of money on the site, or maybe he just doesn't like playing deep. Most regulars for here would probably be betting for. They would probably be buying in for 4K. Escobar doesn't, but that's because he's just getting used to 6 max. I think he's more of a heads up player. Against Eulalie, I just open here with 6-10 offsuit. It's definitely not a standard open for me, but against Eulalie, we are going to use that little bit of information that we saw that he wouldn't play us heads up, so we're thinking that he's just playing too many tables to be getting into these marginal blind versus blind situations a lot. So even if he is defending, he's going to be folding to a lot of double barrels. And while we made the best hand there with the 10s, I think that also exhibits that the 10's not really a card that should change a whole lot. I mean, yeah, sometimes I'll hit a random 10, but for the most part, didn't complete any draws or anything, so he should be kind of fighting back or looking me up a little lighter there, and he didn't, so that shows that our read there was good enough to open 10-6 offsuit against him, because he is going to be folding too much. In the top right, I played him heads up a decent amount. He really likes playing me heads up for some reason, but then our matches are kind of weird. Sometimes he's really aggressive, sometimes he's really boring to play, and I don't really like playing people that are heads up when they're boring. Like, he's not bad enough boring that I'm going to be winning a ton off him. I think he's a pretty decent player, but if it's not like money flying back and forth, a lot of the times I'll get bored and kind of spew off a little bit, and since I've recognized that, I don't want to play someone who's kind of playing a little overly tight heads up, because I think I'm at a disadvantage compared to my normal game. And so I open here with King 10 offsuit against him. I think he's going to be defending kind of liberally here, but I think my 10 dominates him a decent amount of time, things like that. But he also, this deep, doesn't raise a ton. He's not very, I mean, he's aggressive, but it's more of a tight aggressive situation. Like, pre-flop, he's pretty loose, like splashing around a little bit, but post-flop, he's pretty tight aggressive, and once he puts in a raise or something, he's very often double barreling, and when he's double barreling, he's very often triple barreling. So with my hand specifically there, and the fact that he hadn't been really doing much against me, I just gave him a little bit of leeway there by just kind of folding my top pair, and it's definitely exploitable if I do it every time. And I'm definitely, believe me, there's times I've looked him up with ace high, bottom pair, in very marginal situations. But I just felt like in that situation, he was not messing around with me, and he was also at worst going to have a big draw, and he was going to continue a lot on pretty much every turn and every river, and I was just going to have to basically call off my stack. And so that's where you see the power of being deep against someone, and you have a little read on them, but they're also just, if they just pull through with aggression, you're kind of screwed in a lot of spots, because you just can't fight back there. I mean, I could 3-bet the flop there, and then when he shoves, call it off, but like, it's just going to be, I'm just going to be killed so often that even when I'm ahead, I'm just like barely ahead, and it's just going to be very, very tricky here. Okay, so we go back to, and I start to become have a little Nostradamus angle going on here, as against Jay Turton with my little spiel against Show earlier, we see when he basically min-raises here in position, I'm not 3-betting because he'll put me on the draw, but I'm getting immediate odds to draw for two cards, and then he shows up with Jack 9, which was top pair. I don't know why they do this. I don't know why it happens. They just do. And once that happens, he should definitely be betting the river there for value. So we're going to probably be looking him up by when we get to the rivers. We're going to probably be polarizing his range much more. Polarizing his range, and it's going to be shifted much more towards value than bluffs, because a lot of these players, like maybe 20% of the time it'll be a big bluff, 80% of the time it'll be for value. So if you don't have a strong value hand to beat that hand, then you should probably just be folding 100% of the time against them when they're betting the river, because I mean, that's a pretty easy value bet on the river there for him, and he just didn't even think twice about it, immediately checked it down. So yeah, I couldn't tell you why people min-raise there and then shut down, but it just happens, and just be glad that it does, because it's very easy to read and it's very easy to play against. Sleepy Hippo is 3-betting a min raise by Punas, who is under the gun. 100 big blinds deep. I think Sleepy's range is fairly wide here, but it's probably wide, but it's also probably like kind of stronger hands that don't really hit 6, 7, 4. So if he's betting here, it's going to be a lot of hands like kings and queens or whatever. And since he didn't, since he's like half potting here, I would assume that he's kind of got a hand, like at best, to like a nut flush draw, something like that, that wants to. And actually, we'll get to see his hands, so we'll get to see what's happening here. I've watched this video a couple times, but I never paid attention to this hand, so I'm not sure if they actually get to showdown. I assume they do at this point. In the top right, I 3-bet Escobar with Jack-8 suited. Being a heads-up player, he's going to be open probably 100% of his buttons, and Jack-8 suited plays it all right when I get flatted, and I think I'm going to get flatted by him a lot more often than a standard 10-20 regular who's buying in for 100 big blinds. So I think it's got a little play to it post-flop, and I think he's peeling on this flop a decent amount, so there's definitely some value in the 8, betting the 8 for kind of value and also protection against just overs or draws or whatever. If he raised, that'd be a really tough spot on this board. Not sure what I would do. Maybe give him credit the first time, but I definitely shouldn't be bet folding there very often with my 8 here, because there's not a ton of value. I'm missing out on a lot of value by betting and then folding there. Sleepy has the 8 has the thing on the board. I don't think there's any way in hell he ever has an 8 here. I mean, he can from time to time. What Punas probably should have done is shoved himself here, and I think that would have, like, basically when the board straightens in kind of a decently sizable pot, and you have maybe double the pot effective or less, you should be like first in if it's very unlikely that they have that, because if Punas like shoves in here, what's Sleepy Hippo gonna do? Like, yeah, he could call, but that's just whatever. He could also, like, if he's an unknown, like, he can shove there, and basically, even if Sleepy just, yeah, see, with that board bet on there, it looked like Sleepy Hippo. Actually, I don't like his bet at all on that flop. There's no hands he's really folding out for it, and there's going to be not a ton of great double barrel cards for him. So, and the only hands he's folding out are hands that are worse than his. Like, I don't see the guy ever folding a pair on this board. A lot of his, like, marginal hands below ace queen have, like, a gutter, and he can easily get bet off his hand here without giving him a chance to draw to, like, an ace or a queen on the turn. Let's say the guy has Jack 10 of diamonds, and then they both, like, Sleepy bets and Punas raises, and Sleepy has to fold, whereas he could easily just kind of take one off, hit an ace, and then, or hit a queen. Punas, like, tries to get fancy with his draw, and then Sleepy can actually have the best hand and not have to rely on a half pot size bet there. I really don't like that bet by Sleepy. I think Punas' range is pretty strong for, or at least is never folding on there. On the river against Escobar, I have a decision to make. Diamonds missed, and Escobar is definitely a skeptical player. So against a tighter player, I would definitely not be betting here. But against Escobar, I think this is almost a mandatory value bet against him. The only hands I'm even worried about really are like ace 8, 9s, and that's about it. I think 10s you would probably even 4-bet get it in. So like it's basically 9s and ace 8 are the two hands that I'm even close to worried about. Yeah, he could also have like a weak king that he checked through, but I mean, when there's two kings out there, chances are he doesn't have a king, and even if he did, I think there's a good percentage of the time he either raises the flop or bets the turn once I check to him. So I think I'm heavily discounting kings in his range, so if I am beat, I think it's by ace 8 or pocket 9s here, and there's also a lot of hands he can look me up with. He could just kind of put me on. He can have like 8, 9, he could have 10, 9, worse 8s definitely, or 10, 8, worse 8s, and then like just random pocket pairs, 6, 7, going for a hero call. Even like ace high could look me up here pretty easily. And so I think that's a pretty easy value bet, and I think Jack 8's probably near the, probably right at the bottom of my value betting range on that river, which I think is good. Whenever my value betting range, the bottom of it, he's calling down with like that bluff catcher there. I think that's a good scenario. Even though I lost the hand and I lose that bet, I think it's a really good bet for me to make there, and it also will allow me to bluff in that spot where I normally a lot of the time wouldn't be able to bluff because the board paired every draw miss. Well, now it's seen me bet with like a really marginal hand, not really marginal, but a pretty marginal hand in that scenario, and he had nines to look me up. But what if he's got 6-7 next time? Maybe he doesn't look me up, and if he does, maybe I then adjust it to never bluffing there and value betting too much. Like, there's a lot of good things that can come from me value betting too thin there. Value betting thinly just basically opens up your game. If you can't credibly value bet thin, if you don't pick out your spots well, and value betting thin just stems entirely from hand reading and putting yourself in spots to value bet thin correctly. And once you can get that down, value betting thin grows into being able to bluff in marginal spots, and bluffing in marginal spots means that you can take down a lot of hands without seeing showdown, which means that you win that money all the time. Whenever you get to showdown or whenever money goes in and you both, like whenever you're all in or whatever, there's almost always a chance that you're going to lose. But when you can pick it up without seeing showdown, you win the money 100% of the time. So you really want to increase the times that you take down pots without seeing a showdown. So how do we do that? Be able to bluff credibly a little more, and we open that up by value betting thinly. Against Punez here, I quickly shove it in here. I think this play's okay. I don't think it's bad. I don't have any sort of read on Punez other than he played his tens kind of passively against Sleepy Hippo when he was 3-bet when he opened under the gun, which I think is a pretty regular standard way for him to play his tens actually, because the 3-bet wasn't that big, and he doesn't have any real reason to believe that Sleepy Hippo will shove over him late, especially if he hasn't played with Sleepy Hippo very much. And so I think a check raise on this board by him is probably a lot of the time like 6-7, pocket sixes, pocket sevens, but then like it's also a lot of like draws that are probably like if he has 8-9 of clubs or whatever, he might call it off, things like that here. So it's also readless. I do have my pair for showdown value, but I also like, you can never be terrible in a terrible scenario when you have a pair and the flush draw, especially the second nut flush draw. Like, even if I'm called there by 100% of his value range, I'm still doing pretty decent against him. And so I don't want to shoving there is fine. It's definitely not the most sophisticated play. It's definitely going to be not the best play in the long run in terms of like EV once I get to know the player. But it's kind of like a safety net of, okay, I could shove there, know I'm okay when called or whatever a decent amount of the time. And there's also going to be times I dominate his draws that he calls off with. Like there's a few straight flush draws out there that could easily call off with there. And that I dominate those. It kind of looks like whatever. So I think that's a fine way to play it. I don't think it's my most sophisticated hand. I don't think I'm going to be posting that to show to anyone and be like, wow, look how well I played this. I think it's just, okay, every once in a while you can kind of take the easy route out, take the safety net if you don't really know the player, just go from there. I check behind on this flop against Jay Turton. I don't see him really. I think I check behind. Actually, let me rewind that there. Okay, so now our attention's to the bottom left table after the discussion on the top right. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what happened. Into two players. Yeah, I could bet this king high flop a decent amount of time, but I think if I can get past Jay Turton, Sleepy Hippo will fold this a ton of the time on this flop because I think he's just completing because a wide range because Jay Turton's in there, and also if he had a decent king, he would probably 3-bet himself in this scenario. And so, kind of make it look like a squeeze. Jay Turton leads. I turn my set, which is obviously awesome. I decide to raise here because it just looks so full of it that, especially if it'll set up some. I mean, it's obviously a good time to put in more money when you do have a strong hand. 3x in it there, I think, is a pretty good size. I think anything more than that makes it a little scary to him, like I've been slow playing, whereas this looks like I can be like, well, I have a bluff, I have a 7, whatever, and just see what happens. Right now I'm really hoping for a king to drop on the river, if he does call. I'm not sure, I don't really remember if he calls or not. I decided to check by ace-king in the bottom right into 2 players. And then once I do check, I don't think I should be betting this turn very often because it will look like a turn heart draw. And J Turton does fold there. I'd assume he had a hand like 9s, maybe like a king-jack hand. I just check fold in the bottom right. Something that he probably shouldn't be bet folding. Maybe it's okay. Obviously in that scenario I had a big hand, but I think if he's bet folding there, it's probably not a great bet if he's got like 9s. But then again, I don't envision myself raising this type of player very often without a big hand, because I just don't expect him, once he's putting money in, to fold very often. So it could go either way there. And iHustle is starting to get a little more feisty, though he's much more likely to attack these like middle-ish boards like 9-7, 9-5, 2 with 2 diamonds. The original one was 10-7-5 or something with 2 clubs. So those type of boards I'm probably going to tail back my C betting unless I just have air. Like there I had a gut shot, like an overcard, and not much else into 2 players, so I just decided to throw out a C bet to see what happened. You can see that now I just folded the king 10 there. We're even 300 big blinds deep now, and everyone else at the table, like, I mean, Go just sat, and he's got 4K, but, I mean, when the guy to your left is kind of playing pretty aggressively, and he covers you 300 big blinds deep, it's not a great scenario. So I'm going to be playing a little tighter, especially from the blinds, because it looks like he's not playing a ton of tables. So in contrast to Ukulele, he's probably going to be fighting for a lot of the blinds, so we're going to tail back our opening up of the blinds against him. And show limps. I'd assume Escobar's going to isolate here. It's not a bad spot for me to re-isolate here. If he did, I decide to isolate, and he limp folds immediately. Go. I don't really have any sort of read on him. I believe he plays like 5-10 as his main stake, but I think he definitely buys in deep wherever he goes, which leads me to believe that he likes to have that money behind, both to make plays and to kind of trap people, play his big hands, whatever. And whenever someone prefers to buy in deep at either 5-10 or 10-20 or whatever, you have to give them a little more credit for being a little more of a creative player, because 100 big blinds, you're just limiting yourself to the creativity. You're not like, you're basically saying, okay, I don't want to think real hard about that, because I mean, to an extreme example, short stackers don't think at all. Like when they have 20 big blinds, there's no decision really. So on a scale between that and then deep is thinking, always having a lot of creative plays to your arsenal out there, and 100 big blinds is somewhere in between, where you want to have a little play, but you also don't want to have to put in decisions to like huge decisions here. And there's a decent sized pot brewing in the bottom left. I haven't been watching the hand at all, but I just assume J Turton has the best hand there almost always. I decided to 3-bet Sleepy Hippo here. I don't think I've been fairly active with my 3-betting against him, but I don't think he's going to. We have 2 interesting hands here. Okay, let's go over the one in the top left first. It's simpler. Okay, so just don't pay attention to the one in the top right yet. We'll go over that in a little bit. So in the top left, I 3-bet here. I think he's going to be peeling kind of late. I think my ace is definitely the best hand way more often than you'd think so normally in this scenario. And then I can kind of feign that I'm just like shutting down here, or maybe I've got like queens or kings or whatever, and just not really sure what I want to do here. I also don't mind a bet on the turn here because it might get looked up pretty late by like any jack. If I had like ace 10 or better, I'm definitely betting on the turn here because then he can look me up with worse aces, whereas he can obviously not look me up with worse aces when I have ace 2. I decide to tank a little and kind of call, kind of repping that I have like a turn, like a draw, like maybe a big hard draw, maybe clubs or whatever, maybe a pair and a draw. Let's say I have like 6-7 of hearts, something along those lines. And then he gives up on the river with the 8-9 of hearts. That hand where I kind of slow played the nuts with the 9-7 offsuit, though it's not the same type of hand, I would definitely open that ace 2 offsuit on the button there. I didn't really need to fold it. The hand where I had that 9-7 offsuit against Sleepy, he might be a little gun shy about bluffing me now, especially when all the draws miss, so I think I was going to fold there at that point because I felt like he wasn't going to be bluffing, and we saw that he did have the misdraw and he didn't bluff. So now let's rewind to the top right hand, which is a very interesting hand in my opinion. Okay, we've gone back in time. The Punez opens here. I wanted to play my queen unsuited, but I didn't want to 3-bet Punez because I wanted to, with him being only 100 big blinds deep, I wanted to keep him relatively, like the effective stacks behind us, relatively large to the pot so that I could make a few moves against him. So if I 3-bet him there, then I kind of run into the situation Sleepy did, where you can't really rep much, and if I flat, I can just outplay him a lot more often. Plus, I get to definitely see a flop with my hand rather than being bet off it if he does have like aces or whatever. And then Go squeezes. And I think he's got probably a decently strong range here, which would make Queen 9 fold. But also, I wanted to just take a flop in position against him and kind of just play, kind of feel out what he was going to do. And Queen 9 suited can hit a decent amount of flops, and it's definitely not a terrible hand to try to. It's not going to be dominated very often. Like let's say he's not going to have ace 9, king 9 often. So when I hit my 9 as a top pair, that's probably going to be a good scenario unless he has an overpair, which in that case I'll just have to start hand reading and make a good read there. And if I'm going to play so loose pre-flop, I have to have a reason to do it. My reason for doing it is that I think my best attribute is reading hands and then being able to credibly rep hands. And it sounds like kind of a generic vague term, but basically I think my hand reading is my strongest suit. And with my hand reading, it allows me to kind of take some liberties pre-flop where a lot of time people wouldn't be able to. And it also allows me to be a much harder player to play against. Because if I'm just flatting here and then being able to squeeze, then I'm just like, okay, whatever. I'm just kind of looking like, okay, that player's pretty easy to beat, just squeeze him every time that he's flatting because he never has a big hand. Which, then I'd have to start flatting big hands to try to counteract that, and it's just not going to be a scenario that I'm entirely in love with. So, I decide to take one off here on the flop, and a lot of good can come from that for me. I can play the hard draw, I can play the straight draw, and the thing is, with my style, I'm floating a lot, I'm calling down a lot, but I'm not really raising a ton, like especially in position, because I view position as so powerful that you want to make them make as many tough decisions as possible. And so if you're doing that, when you're floating them and you're making them make a decision of, do I bet again, do I check raise, do I check call, do I check fold, all these decisions are much harder than if I'm just raising here, he's got ace king and he just ships it in. Like, that's an easy decision for him. I don't want to make his life easy. So what I do is I'm in position here, and I'm like, okay, I'll just call. Now I can rep a straight, I can rep a flush, I can hit my straight. If a 10 comes, I can credibly rep a lot of different things on this turn. And we're getting a little deeper now, and it's going to be pretty scary for him to start firing into this board, especially like if the 9 of hearts hits. What's he going to be bet calling here with on the turn? Maybe a flush, maybe it's like some sort of draw, maybe the made straight or whatever, but a lot of the time he's going to have a hand that's like decent, but like it's going to be pretty hard for him to get it in good here if he's bet calling it. So even if he has like ace king here, and he's betting and then calling my shove, he's just crushed a lot of the time. So then it becomes a tough thing because he doesn't want to bet ace king and fold it. So then, can he check call? Like, does he check raise? Like, there's all these tough scenarios that you can get in when they have a pretty defined range and your range is pretty broad and vague. And so, you obviously don't want to be putting yourself into scenarios where, like, in this hand, we'll see what happens. I just bet 13-20, which I think I bet pretty much with any hand that I wanted to get it in here, whether it be a set, a straight, flush, whatever. And he thinks for a little bit, and then he calls. Obviously, if he raises, I'm folding because I'm not betting my 9 for value or my draw to try to get it in here. And he is going to, after a little deliberation, he is, come on now, you can do it. He's going to make the call. And then I get a perfect river. And the thing is, I also have aces on 2 tables, which just shows me running well. The thing is, if I'm going to play with the strategy of being kind of loose, being kind of just peeling a lot of flops, floating a lot, calling a lot, it's going to force me to do a few things. It's going to force me to hero call in some spots that some people may not be comfortable hero calling with, because if I'm floating a lot with my hands, to balance that out, I also have to play drawy boards a little bit slower with my made hands that some people might rather raise there. And so that forces me to make a couple more hero calls more often, and that is where I heavily rely on my hand reading and just kind of a natural instinct, or not really natural, but more of a developed instinct for game flow of just playing a ton of hands against a ton of different opponents. It was something you'll develop over time if you're playing against these people day in and day out. You get to kind of this sixth sense of when they're likely to go off for a bluff, when they're likely to be value betting thin enough that you can make a call, when they're likely that you can take them off hands. And so those are going to be some tough scenarios I know I'm putting myself in order to, in my mind, maximize my EV and also be a tougher player to play against so that they're playing worse against me. So when I get in situations where I float this flop and I get an awesome turn card where I can rep a flush or straight, and then also I get an awesome river card where I can rep a, like, even if I didn't have it here, if I had 10-9, Jack 10, King 10, and I was just kind of semi-bluffing on the turn, now I've made my straight. So, and now I don't think there's really any 10s in his range here. I think 10s in his range for squeezing here out of position deep are few and far between, except for maybe pocket 10s, and I don't think he's ever bet or check calling a turn call with pocket 10s unless it's exactly pocket 10s with the 10 of hearts. And even then, like, yeah, I'll get called, but that's like one scenario out of so many in which he's going to fold. And so he's going to check here. I think it's much more likely that he had maybe a hand like 2 pair, like maybe he has like, I don't think he'd fold. I think he'd probably shove in with like King Jack here on 2 pair. Whether it's good or not, I think he would probably, that's how he'd react with King Jack to my bet on the turn. But it's probably more likely that he has like maybe Ace Queen with the Ace of Hearts, Ace Queen with the Queen of Hearts, King Queen with the Queen of Hearts, Ace King with the Ace of Hearts, some sort of marginal made hand with the flush draw that he doesn't see a lot of value in raising with. He's kind of trying to spike that heart. So if a heart did come out, it's probably just shutting down here. And I just get the best possible card I can get to be bluffing here. It doesn't pair the board, so it doesn't look a little suspicious, and it also is just makes a 10, it makes even more of my semi-bluffing hands the winner, and he immediately folds there. So it looks like he was just calling, trying to improve there on that type of board. He was not wanting to, he didn't have a hand that was good enough to be putting more money in on the turn, and so since the river only improved my range, he didn't have a hand that was good enough to put that same amount of money in by the river. And so I think that bluff is mandatory, and it's, if you're going to get it to run out like that against someone with the with how it worked, then you've got to be just bluffing there 100% of the time, basically. If you got to there like I did. Siu Maikon or Kumakon, however you want to pronounce it, Sleepy Avo opened under the gun. I 3-bet him and see my con. 4-bet, cold 4-bet me, so I think he's got like queens, kings, ace, king there all the time. So showing with my aces is a no-brainer there. And I hold up, so continue running good in this session, which is always nice. And let me check here. Okay, I just checked on the time, and we're about 5 minutes past an hour in terms of the length of the video. And so I think we saw a lot of interesting spots here. We'll end on that big bluff, and then the aces win for me, and we'll pick it up here for the second part of the series. I hope you guys learned some things here. If, as usual, any comments or critiques or bad things, good things, anything you like or dislike, just leave them in the comments section, and I'll try to improve for the next time. Alright, this is Scott Augustine for cardrunners.com.